Is Uganda going to have a president for life? A proposed bill to amend the country's constitution has sparked an intense debate online, tension in the streets, brawls in the parliament, and a media shutout. I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream live on Al Jazeera English and on YouTube.
And I'm Dan Ming. The conversation has been fiery online, and I'll bring in your tweets and YouTube comments as they come in. Now, take a look at that panel. That's just a sample of the comments we've been getting for this show. This pitch comes to us from our Uganda community. Here's James Propa.
I pitched this because I feel it's coming with selfish motives from the NRM MPs. They want to keep President Museveni in power. So this is why we need to use the international community, the international media to cover such stories so that the whole world can know what is happening back in Uganda.
Needless to say that our generation has not seen any government apart from the President of Yoweri Museveni. We are therefore disgusted by this man's vainglorious quench for power, and we stand to say, Tojikwatako, don't tamper with the article.
A bill to scrap constitutional age caps on politicians in Uganda has put democracy to the test. These are just some of the scenes from Parliament on Tuesday as that bill came under debate. Parliamentarians hurled chairs and swung microphone stands, exposing a bitter rift between lawmakers. MPs from the opposition have vowed to fight the amendment. Well, currently, Ugandan law prevents anyone over the age of 75 from running for office. The ruling National Resistance Movement is looking to amend that provision to prevent discrimination in politics. The president's party enjoys an overwhelming majority in the assembly, and the bill is expected to pass. President Yoweri Museveni has been in power since 1986. He's largely dismissed the amendment and chided other leaders who refused to leave office. Here he is speaking to Al Jazeera in April.
The people have been electing me in spite of Al Jazeera and...
Are you going to run for another term?
We follow our constitution.
So you're not going to run for another term?
We follow our constitution.
Because you reach the age limit in 3 years and you will not run.
We follow the constitution of Uganda.
Can you explain that?
That's what I've told you.
But there are reports that you are about to change the constitution so that it can allow you to run for another term.
I've told you.
Is that going to happen?
We follow the constitution of Uganda, and that is the will of the people of Uganda.
Are you going to change the constitution?
I cannot change the constitution because I don't have that power.
But is this something that is in the discussion now in Uganda?
That is speculation, and I don't have time for speculation.
Joining us now, Jackson Kafusi is a member of Parliament for Kayaka South. Bobi Wine is an opposition member of Parliament for Jadando East Uganda. Raymond Mujuni is a journalist for NTV. And John Mbaku is professor of economics at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. Welcome to the stream, gentlemen. Bobby, I'm going to start here on my laptop with a Facebook post put out by members of your team yesterday at 11:19. Amidst a ruthless wrap-up by state operatives at the Parliament today, you and other honorable members were detained in police vans and driven to separate police stations. Right now, he's in custody at the police station. So you were just released from jail in the early hours of Thursday. Tell us about what happened during that scuffle in Parliament from your perspective.
Well, on Tuesday, one of the members of Parliament came into the chambers with a gun, and that is the Honorable Ronald Chibule. One of the members spotted him and raised an alarm, and all of us were concerned. So a scuffle broke out, and amidst that, they made the gun disappear, but Speaker took note. Well, House could not continue because more chaos erupted and it was adjourned. So on Wednesday, the Speaker came and indeed confirmed that the Honorable had come in and eluded the security check. So he was suspended, but surprisingly, even we, the members that raised concern, were suspended. So we were not allowed to say anything, even when we tried to object to it. The Speaker gave us 30 minutes to get out of the chambers, but within less than 2 minutes, soldiers stormed the parliament. Soldiers from the Special Forces Command, the elite brigade that guards the president, came, started roughing up members of the opposition and indeed beating us up. So we had to put up a fight, but because there were too many, they overpowered us, dragged us out, tortured us, and then dropped us in police vans and drove us and detained us in faraway police stations till way beyond midnight when we were dropped off at our homes.
So clearly a very serious situation, but take a look at my laptop here, and there are Ugandans on Twitter who are finding the levity in all of this. A few quick memes here with your face photoshopped over other people's. This in a fighting ring. Here is you looking like Rambo a little bit in the scene of a movie, and this one on top of doing some fighting moves with the hashtag Don't Touch It, meaning to the presidential age limits. So levity online, but this is a serious issue. Why is it so important to you, Bobi Wine?
Well, Article 102 is very important because now it is the only lasting remedy we have to a peaceful transition of power. Needless to mention that Uganda has never had a peaceful transition of power from one president to another. And indeed, that's one of the reasons that took President Museveni to the bush, because he promised a fundamental change, he promised real democracy, and when he won power, courtesy of the people that joined him, he promised that he would only rule for 4 years and hand over power to a civilian government. Since then, he has been cooking a new lie every time his mandate expires for the last 31 years. And today, when his mandatory age is about to expire, he is moving together with his party to amend the constitution to allow him to be president for life.
Right, so I'd like to get Raymond into the conversation. Raymond, yes. You're a journalist who's been covering this story. Take a look at this tweet we got from Hannah. She says, leave the Constitution as it is. To change it to suit one man is unpatriotic and self-serving. She's implying that this change is all for Museveni. She says, I love my Uganda, but hate my government. Raymond, what are you hearing? What has the reaction been to this proposal to remove age limits?
Before we get to the reaction, I think it's for context purposes, you need to know that Uganda has one of the youngest populations in the world, but also you have only 2.7% of our population is actually above the age of 65. And the number of people that have actually seen a presidency that is not Museveni's presidency are not even more than 12%. And part of the things that many people fear is that we might have another transition of power that's not peaceful. And so the safeguards that are left in the Constitution for a peaceful transfer of power, right now, there's only one, and that's the one of the 75-year age limit. Well, it doesn't, the president has said that this doesn't serve him. In fact, he hasn't acknowledged the existence of this age limit bill. The last time he spoke about it was somewhere around July 19th when he said that there was no motion to debate, so there was no need for us to talk about the age limit. But again, more of the people that are pushing for it are people from the ruling party. And the ruling party has a caucus which he is the chairman of. So there is already, at the heart of it, at the heart of the matter, many people say that this seeks to favor, and indeed will favor if it passes, the president of the country right now, Museveni. And the manner in which it's being done also raises bit of questions. We saw yesterday the people that came into parliament to take out the members of parliament that had been stuck in parliament. The members that you saw walk into parliament and grab the MPs are actually members of the elite guard of the presidential unit, the Special Forces Command. Many of them, their faces have been highlighted close to the president on many occasions, guarding him. And then, of course, the parliament rules of procedure are clear that if a member of parliament who has been suspended doesn't leave the house, then it falls upon the sergeant of arms. So it remains a big question why the sergeant of arms, who was present then, was not allowed to do their job. And then, of course, we had to take extra security from the president's guards to come and lift members of parliament out. But of course, on the streets, it still remains a very contentious matter. The ruling party has numbers in the House. They have about 303 MPs, and the independents, 66, I think 48 of the 66 independent MPs are NRM leaning, and opposition just has 56. So if it comes down to a game of numbers, the opposition doesn't stand a chance. And the agitation that you see from the opposition to stop it in its early stages is that it shouldn't get down to a game of numbers, because they will lose there.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, Raymond. I want to bring in a member of the president's ruling NRM party, Jackson. You're joining us now. Can you lay out your party's case for supporting this bill?
I've listened to my colleagues. I've listened to Honorable Chagulanyi, alleging that we are making amendments to suit the needs of the president. You see, I keep telling my colleagues that on the date of swearing in, they're usually given two books. One book is the Rules of Procedure of Parliament. The second one is the Constitution. You are expected to read that Constitution and understand it. Our Constitution was promulgated in 1995, and I know very well under constitutional law that the Constitution is a living thing. It must not be rigid, but it must also not be very flexible. It must be adaptable. It must allow for amendment. Article 259 of our Constitution provides that our Constitution can be amended and sets procedures for it to be amended, as long as those procedures are set forth.
Right. And Jackson, I appreciate that you are a lawyer, and so you're coming at this with a legal perspective. But for our audience who's watching in Uganda who aren't lawyers, and they know their constitution, and they know the articles, they know that it is a living document and can be amended, what they want to hear from you is, why do you think that these age limits should be scrapped?
That's where I'm getting, my sister. You see, Article 183 of our Constitution says you cannot stand for LOC 5 or district chairperson unless you are 35 years of age. And yet, the same Constitution says as long as you are 18 years and above, you can stand for Member of Parliament. Now, that alone is disenfranchising the youth who would be willing to participate in leadership at lower levels. Our democratic principles, as embedded in that Constitution, indicate or dictate that we shall do all that it takes to create an all-inclusive political process so that everyone participates. Now you are telling me a 30-year-old cannot be a person. A 30-year-old cannot be a district chairperson.
If I could jump in here, it's considering strength, and I need. Now, many of us are asking the question, is it just now that the ruling party has realized that many of these articles in the Constitution actually are those that are disenfranchised?
So Raymond, I hear your question, and I see Bobi Wine also raising his hand because he wants to respond. I want to get our community in. I want to get our community in because they're also listening to Jackson. Go ahead, Dan.
So we got this tweet from Senfuma. Jackson, just take a listen to this tweet and a video comment. I'll pose them to you. Senfuma says, first it was term limits, now it's age limits. Next year it'll be the presidential election scrapped off. And then I want you to take a listen to this video comment we got from Rosebell. She's Ugandan but lives in Sweden.
Right now, President Museveni removed already the presidential term limits. That's why Ugandans are willing to fight out on this one. It's like it's the only thing separating them from ever deciding for their own destiny, because as long as President Museveni is on the ballot, we have had so many elections that are not free and fair, and we know that it's never going to be free and fair if the incumbent, if President Museveni in particular, who has entrenched power for 31 years, is still on the ballot. So this is about the future of Uganda.
So Jackson, this is what we're hearing. People are worried. They saw the government scrap term limits in 2005, and now they see this proposal to get rid of age limits as just further entrenchment of Museveni's power and a possible president for life. What do you say to that concern, Jackson?
You see, following elections in 2001, the contender then, Dr. Kizza Besigye, went to the Supreme Court and filed a petition. The Supreme Court made recommendations which were not followed by the government. And In 2006, Dr. Besigye did the same. The Supreme Court did not put those recommendations in effect. Now, in 2016, Amama Mbabazi went to the Supreme Court and filed a petition. And this time, with all anger, because the Supreme Court felt that it had been ignored by government, set down rules and said these should be put in effect within 2 years from the time of elections, from the time of swearing in. And as we speak now, we are left with 6 months to go past the deadline set by the Supreme Court. Now,
Bobby wants to add something to that. Bobby, go ahead.
The Supreme Court indicated clearly that we should make all amendments.
Jackson, 1 second. I hear where you're coming from. Bobby, go ahead.
For the benefit of our people listening in Uganda and all over the world, we are talking about Article 102B, and this is an article that limits the presidential age limit. Yeah, you are talking about discrimination, but I mean the Constitution is 22 years old. It has never come up until now when President Museveni is being excluded by the law. The same thing happened when President Museveni was finishing his second term in power. That is when the ruling party remembered to scrap off the term limits. And now they are trying to scrap off the age limit. You see, it is rather shameful for a lawyer like my brother Jackson Kafuzi to try and mix up issues. We are not talking about LC5. We are talking about presidential. And if you are trying to, hide it behind the youth, then it's even more shameful, because we are looking at the youth agitating for change. And this is the only opportunity to have another generation take over from the older generation peacefully. And this article is the only provision that can...
Could I say something?
All right, no, I'd like to just get in and bring in some more comments we're getting from Ugandans online, and I'd like to pose this to Raymond. Raymond, take a look at this tweet that we got. Jackson, just hold on. Raymond, so Tony says, I was there, and this was a university protest, by the way. He says, I was there, and he saw tear gas, police brutality, as arrests were made. He said he was able to take this picture. And then we also got Piper, who said that at this university protest, security forces treated whoever they met as a criminal. It's like it was a crime to be born on campus that day. Raymond, can you explain to me, can you describe to me what kind of reaction we're seeing from the authorities when students have gathered to protest this proposal to remove age limits?
Well, the reaction has been the same. Everyone that has come up to protest the removal of Article 1.2b has been arrested. Now, those that have protested for it have not been arrested. We've seen their protests march through Arua town, we've seen them march through Mbarara town, we've seen them march through Mbale town. And these are three different towns. Now, on different places, in campuses like Makerere University, in Chambogo University, on the day when Parliament was having the scuffle that you just described, many of the students that actually tried to protest ended up in being arrested or being brutally handled. At Makerere right now, as we speak, we still have the military camped there. And so it does raise a lot of questions about the behavior of the security forces. But these are questions that have been persistent about our history as a country, that the security forces always act for and on behalf of the person that is in power. And the opposition has raised that a couple of times. I wanted a bit to respond also to the lawyer about the amendments and the Supreme Court petition. Now, the Supreme Court petition... I'm
actually going to pause you there, Raymond, because when you mentioned Supreme Court petition, I know that a lot of eyes glaze over in our international community, and I know that John wanted to get in as well. So, John, what did you want to add?
Well, I hate to put it this way, but I think that what the people of Uganda are going through is not unique to Uganda. A lot of African countries are going through the same problem. And I think part of the reason they are going through this problem is that they are looking at the wrong problem. I'm afraid to say so, that the Ugandans are currently looking at the wrong problem, because they had term limits. The president easily changed them. They had age limits. The president and his party are now trying to change them. So I think that what the Ugandans should be talking about right now, and which is what I think other African countries should be talking about, is how to make sure that the Constitution cannot easily be manipulated by whoever is in government to suit themselves. I think that even if the Ugandans eventually win this case and allow age limits to stay there, there is no reason why someone coming in, even after Museveni, will not try to do the same thing and change age limits so that they could stay in power indefinitely. So I think that the discussion that we should be having is a discussion on how to make sure that we have a constitution in Uganda that cannot easily be manipulated by whoever is in government so that they can tweak the constitution to meet their own needs. The second thing that I want to talk about, or I want to say very briefly, is that people in Uganda and people in all African countries should understand why it is necessary to put limits on the president. Number one is to encourage political competition. In countries that I've seen where there are no limits on the presidency, young people eventually become so discouraged that they have no interest in politics because they know that the person in power is going to stay there, as you see in Cameroon, indefinitely.
John, I'd just like to get a comment in and read it for Bobi Wine. We got this comment from YouTube. Donnie Barnes says, a 2-term limit is a must to ensure peaceful transitions of power. Museveni is making himself a king. Bobi Wine, what would you like to see done to rectify the situation as you see it?
Actually, I would like to see President Museveni respect his word. He has always been saying one thing and a few years later forgetting it very fast. He was Uganda's best revolutionary. All of us
when every other person is allowed to contest under the constitution. The constitution will allow everybody to contest, whoever is willing and able is free to contest. Why do you think the amendments are made to favor President Museveni? If you know you can beat him at the ballot, don't you come and contest?
Well, you cannot beat President Museveni at the ballot because elections are not free and fair. Just a year ago, in 2016, we went to the ballot. You saw it as clearly as I saw it, that it was rigged. The military took over all polling stations. The winner, Dr. Kizza Besigye, was incarcerated at his house and not even allowed to go and petition the results of the election. So you realize that for as long as President Museveni is on the ballot, the election is just a formality. That is why we are saying that.
But you know that an election is a referendum on the performance of an incumbent, a referendum on the performance of the incumbent, so that if people agree with that incumbent's abilities, they give him another term. If they don't,
elections in Uganda have not always.
Well, Jackson, I mean that's a good question there. Do you think that the president is going to run again in 2021?
I cannot say yes or no because that's a personal choice. It is up to him to make that choice.
Well said. Dan?
So I'd like to give the last word to community. We got this tweet from RK in Uganda. He says, this is the fork in the road where the NRM, that's the ruling party, can either choose and organize the first peaceful transition or have history repeat itself.
Interesting comment. Bobi Wine, I will give you the very last word in about 20 seconds. We know that this bill is expected to pass because the ruling party has a majority in Parliament. What happens next on your end?
Well, it has always been said that history repeats itself, but one wise man in Uganda called Elia Kategaya said that's not true. He said stupid people repeat history. So in order to avoid the repetition of our murky history, it is important for President Museveni to give Ugandans a gift, and a gift of a peaceful transition of power, and indeed give himself a gift of a beautiful legacy. He has an opportunity to be
Wine, I'm going to pause you there. This conversation will continue with the hashtag AJStream. Thanks to our guests and to our community for pitching this show. We'll see you online.